Our disability is our greatest strength. It gives us a supervision to see the issues facing humanity from a more inclusive perspective and the grit to fight back against all odds. Welcome to Super Adaptables, the More Than Walking Video podcast discussion. Welcome to Super Adaptables, the podcast where people of all abilities gather to discuss pressing issues that affect the disability community and the implications for the world at large. We're your hosts. I am Corey Pheez, C4 complete quadriplegic since 2005.
And I am Jonathan Sigworth, C7 complete quadriplegic since 2006, both of us hailing from the great state of Connecticut.
Don't feel all that great. It is, right now it's 38, but, it's supposed to get colder during the week.
The winter is just getting started, Corey.
Yeah, pretty much.
It's only mid-February.
Yeah, that's true. Cold-hearted Valentine's, I guess. But we are recording this on Thursday, the 13th of February, 2025. And in a little bit, we'll be discussing with some of our amazing super adaptables to talk about the true cost of war in privatized healthcare.
And before we do, I just want to let you know, as always, that Super Adaptables this year is made possible in part by a grant from the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation's National Paralysis Resource Center. The information provided and opinions expressed in these podcasts do not necessarily reflect the views of the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation. For more information about the Foundation's National Paralysis Resource Center, visit www.christopherreeve.org. Also, the views expressed in this podcast do not necessarily reflect those of More Than Walking either, but belong to us as individual speakers.
So as we got into our first initial podcast of this month, we discussed about the history to provide some context about where the VA started and where the VA is currently at. And so we're going to just delve briefly into some history behind the VA's model. So in Lincoln's second inaugural address, he spoke about reconciliation with a message to those who fought to preserve the Union. Let us strive on to finish the work we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds, to care for him who shall have borne the battle, and for his widow and his orphan. And though he didn't live to see the country unified, his words have endured concerning the care of veterans and their families.
However, this promise wasn't foolproof, and while veterans may worry less, many Americans die without access to health care. According to one report in 2015, reviewing years of cases, up to 307,000 veterans or more may have died while waiting for their applications for care to be processed. Now, imagine the toll on the current estimated 26 million Americans without health insurance. During war, battles often end with casualties, but accessing healthcare should never come at such a cost.
Absolutely. And, I think when we try to draw some parallels between the two, we're really trying to say that the toll can be much greater for the general public because of lack of access to healthcare, affordable healthcare, et cetera. But with that, we want to welcome the other super adaptables with us today. And as we call on you, say hello, your name, where you're calling in from, your disability, and briefly, do you know any veterans? And if so, what concerns them the most regarding healthcare? And Harley, you can start us off.
Hello, my name is Harley Draven. I'm hailing from the great state of Texas. I am a C7 incomplete quadriplegic and have been since my 19th birthday in 1994. And as for knowing veterans, my second husband was a veteran. He spent some time over in Iraq. And so I have a great deal of respect for veterans. My uncle fought in Vietnam. And I think the healthcare, from my understanding, they get really good healthcare after they come back. And I think that, I wish that our regular healthcare, like for me, I'm on Medicaid, Medicare, and I wish that we could get more benefits like they do. From my understanding that, they're well taken care of medically, but I think that they need to be taken care of on so many other levels because there are so many veterans that are treated poorly. They're homeless. They can get a minimum wage job. I mean, I feel that our veterans should be treated so much better than they are in general.
Absolutely. Not to sound biased, but as a veteran, I agree with you 100%. Scott.
Hi, I'm Scott Eugene Roberts. I hail from the great state of Minnesota. I am a C2, C4 quadriplegic incomplete since 2020. And I have a brother that's ex-military that's utilized veteran services. And I have a tragic tale from my father-in-law, who is a Vietnam vet, who was at the poor end of receiving services. And unfortunately, it was an ill fate for him. So I have a lot of interest in it because of that. In that, I agree. These people did the ultimate service. Those of us that have not served can only just say, why can't we write bigger checks for them? Why can't we put them in some of the nicest places? I just recently have been seeing some uptick in Minnesota where they're taking old hotels and abandoned colleges and looking at turning them into veteran services homes, model communities. But that's just starting to take place, and more of it needs to happen, I think. But for my part of it, as I said, I've just sat and watched it from the outside. But again, I've known so many people in the military and armed services that come back with tales and stories, if not physical, mental. And I think that's another part of it that needs to be addressed, is how many of these people, besides being homeless before it, come back and do not know how to integrate themselves back into our society. And I think that's a really important part of any healthy lifestyle, whether you get services by the state, the federal portion of it, or if you have your own, is the mind-body combination.
Wow. Shout out to the great state of Minnesota for implementing those type of changes from the infrastructure side. That's cool. Brandon.
Hello, I am Brandon Patterson. I am 40 years old. I am from Colorado. I am a C4, C5 complete from 2017 from a motor vehicle accident. And I would like to start by saying, Corey, thank you for your service.
Appreciate that.
My whole thought process on this is I've got family going all the way to the Civil War that have been in the military, so there's been stories obviously from every generation that can be worse and worse and then better and then worse again, and it just goes on and on. I've got friends and family, like I said, that have been in the military, and it's really a hit or miss thing. I've got some family members that say it's the most amazing healthcare they've ever seen, that they've ever had. I've got a buddy that can't even get a call back to tell him F you from the VA. You know what I mean? Like, hit or miss. So my whole thought process too is we need to start policing our own backyard. I've said it on this platform numerous times, but stop giving millions and millions of dollars to illegal immigrants and start using that money that we're giving them for housing. Let's start housing our homeless. Our homeless veterans. Let's start giving better health care to our veterans. Let's start taking care of our own stuff here before we start sending trillions of dollars to the Ukraine, to Yugoslavia, to wherever. You know what I mean? Like, let's take care of us here.
Gotcha. Copy that. And thank you for that. I really appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
This is a subject that, generally speaking, people throughout the entire United States and quite frankly, around the world, somebody knows a veteran and, understands a little bit about the healthcare system that we are very privileged to have and to be a part of. But I also know that with trying to understand that, it comes with some, wonder, like, okay, why are veterans homeless? Why haven't they received the benefits that they need? But it's also about the different types of costs and the different programs that veterans are part of, and currently what this administration and administrations before that to evaluate these type of social safety nets. And we're going to get into listing some of those social safety nets that veterans get to take advantage. But with question one, when people think of veterans healthcare, you often hear people say they earn their benefits. And some may interpret that as suggesting that the privilege of healthcare is worked for and not a natural right. Do you believe this phrase is discriminatory against people who did not serve? And do you think lawmakers and people generally have more confidence in knowing how their tax dollars are spent when the term veteran is attached to healthcare and its associated costs? John, I'd love for you to give me your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I think it's important to right off the bat kind of answer this in the context of what we've been seeing in the last few weeks. In that, when we think about, what do we deserve, what do we need in terms of our care and our services, right now we're getting bombarded with a lot of messaging, Brandon, as you're saying, that we're not getting the care that we deserve or that we need because it's being given to someone else. And I really believe there is a concerted effort to take vulnerable communities, whether it's people with disabilities, whether it's ethnic minorities, whether it's poor people on Medicaid, whether it's illegal immigrants, whether it's immigrants, period. And the narrative is that we're not getting what we need because it's being given to someone else. And that someone else is always going to be a vulnerable group. It's going to be immigrants. It's going to be the LGBTQ plus community. It's going to be some other group that is in a vulnerable position. And the reality is that all that money that is being cut from being sent to Ukraine, all that money that is being cut, not being sent to USAID to help cure Ebola and prevent pandemics from overseas, all that funding that's not being sent to treat HIV/AIDS, it's not coming back to expand Medicaid. It's not coming back to expand disability payments. It's coming back to pay off tax cuts for the ultra wealthy of this country. And it's a huge lie that vulnerable groups, especially ours, are being fed. So in the context of that, when we talk about, Corey and I have discussed, when we talk about veterans healthcare, and I don't have any immediate family connection. Well, my grandparents were both in World War II, as many of our grandparents were. But in my immediate family, I don't have any veteran connections. There is this sense that if you're a veteran, you deserve these benefits, which is great. But it does set up a separation. And even I wonder, Corey, maybe you can speak to this. Does this play into the reintegration part of it? What if we all had the types of benefits that veterans had? What if we all had the same in health insurance, where you don't need to enroll in anything when you come back from the service? You're already in it because it's the same thing that you were in when you went in. What if there's not this separation of systems, but we're all in the same system? It doesn't matter if you're a lawmaker. You also have the same health insurance that someone on Medicaid has. So there's a level playing field. There's a level system that everyone is accessing, and therefore we're all invested in making it run as smoothly as possible. So I don't think it's necessarily discriminatory to say that we deserve these benefits, because I think we all do. It should be a rights thing. And unfortunately, I do think that when we tag on veterans health insurance, or it does make us feel a little better, because there is kind of this stigma. We can talk a little bit later, where if everyone were getting the same level of benefits, we would be concerned, whether it's being framed as socialism or universal healthcare has a kind of a bad rap, bad reputation. But that is essentially what veterans benefits are. Veterans healthcare is. It's universal healthcare for veterans. So those are my initial thoughts on it. But would love to hear your thoughts. And Mark, if you could introduce yourself, and do you know any veterans in your life and their experience with the VA before answering question one?
Yeah, my name's Mark. I live in South Carolina. I'm a C7 quad. Two of my uncles served in Vietnam. One of them has got quite a bit of PTSD and other issues associated with that, and a lot of bad habits that have caught up with him. And he gets wonderful benefits from the VA. They put in a chairlift for him to go up and down to his basement and to his upstairs. They've done different things as far as getting him, a lot of help at the hospital and all that. So he's overall been taken care of pretty well by that.
And as far as your like outlook on, using that term, earned their benefits, do you view that as, discriminatory against those who didn't serve? And do you think that having the word veteran attached to it helps taxpayers, voters, all of us look at the system and where money is going? Kind of, yeah, I'm okay with it because now I know where my tax dollars are going, as opposed to like maybe another program that sponsors like unemployment.
No, I certainly think voters feel better about giving money and benefits for someone that's listed as a veteran. Veterans got the shaft quite a bit after Vietnam, but then that's come around quite a bit in the 80s and 90s, and they're looked upon a lot more favorably. It's a finite resource, everything, and I wish it could be spread more evenly, certainly, but I agree it's easier for taxpayers to say yes to a veteran. Part of my job is to receive and donations of medical equipment and medical supplies and then give them away to the community. I have veterans' families call me all the time wanting to give me a ramp because they get these really nice aluminum modular ramps put on their houses. Then the vet dies and the family doesn't know what the hell to do with it because the VA doesn't want her back. Why the hell can't they recycle those things? If they would come up with a system where they could be, given out to somebody maybe who's not a vet, or at least give them to the next vet, maybe then that money could be spent on other quads and paras that aren't veterans. But I don't know. I haven't figured out how to make that happen.
Yeah, that's a very good question. So in my experience, what happens is if you receive a piece of equipment and you have had it for 10 years, oftentimes the A is spec'd out for your property. So it may not translate to another person's home. Secondly, regulations on that piece of property, on that piece of equipment tend to, become discontinued, right? Like they just don't have the parts for it. They don't service it any longer. So then the VA doesn't take it back. They leave it really upon the veteran to find like a neat market or somewhere that takes in, older pieces of equipment that can be refurbished. And sometimes those things just get scrapped for junk and people receive, payouts like because of the scrap metal that's involved in it. But yeah, I can understand the level of waste. And then the hard part too is if you have a disability and you wish to turn those pieces of equipment over so that they can be recycled, how do you even get to the place? Usually there's like a charge, right? You already, may not be able to afford things as it is. There's a charge in a lot of those places, to come pick that piece of equipment up. So sometimes the VA does use rental systems. I had a very large and elaborate aluminum ramp in my parents' house, but it was under like a rental contract. And so when it was done, the company just took it back, which is good. But, before I get to Harley, I wanted to just break down just very quickly. So when we talk about veterans, and you said that, of people that have had different types of experiences, it really sometimes is a pervasive problem, but it also is, it's also like what happens with the individual. Sometimes their claims gets processed very quickly, and you have to go through an eligibility process in order to even get it. So it's like you may have served, but if you didn't have like an injury that was caused or made worse by your active duty service, you don't naturally translate to get veterans benefits and veterans health care. It doesn't work like that. You could be discharged for a hardship or early out. And those who served prior to September 7th, 1980. So that's why a lot of Vietnam vets, now they're starting to get their claims processed. But, the Veterans Administration offers a wide variety of services for vets that sometimes you just wonder like, wow, why can't everybody get this? And that's because, the funding just isn't there. And some of those are financial assistance, life insurance, which is key, is important, home loans, education, vocational rehabilitation, burial assistance, and as we know, healthcare. And these things, we kind of maybe get a little bit of tunnel vision regarding them because we just think about veterans benefits, but there are so many other programs that vets benefit the ones who don't necessarily are enrolled in the healthcare system. And that's, right now under review is the outreach and assistance for socially disadvantaged and veteran farmers. As we all know, price of eggs are going up. We have all kind of issues going on at the grocery store. Rural housing preservation grants, those are becoming affected, and those really help veterans who are in those Midwest states who may be elderly and disabled, and they're depending on that money. And, last podcast we had, I misspoke. I said the Ronald McDonald House, I believe. It's actually the Fisher House Foundation. So when I got injured, the Fisher House played a pivotal role in my parents' ability to stay lodged for free on base while I was hospitalized. So it's bigger than just the healthcare benefits that's going on. But Harley, what's your thoughts on question one?
I absolutely know that veterans deserve the health care and the VA benefits. I mean, they give their life to God and country. It's the things I've seen while being at Fort Hood here in Texas. Yeah, it was only for 2 short years, but I mean, that was during Operation Iraqi Freedom, and the guys that came back, the women that came back, and how they were changed and altered, whether it be physically, mentally, or both. Yeah, darn straight they earned it. Darn straight they have. And as for, being discriminatory or not, I don't see it that way. And if somebody does, then that's their, misconception and their skewed perception or knowledge of it. I think that they need to broaden their minds and look at, what has a veteran done for our country, specifically that person. Does that person have a safe place to lay their head at night? Yeah. Well, who provided that safe place? Who kept you safe enough to do that? Our soldiers go through so much in all branches of the military. They go through so much, and not just here at, stateside, but abroad. And then it's not just the soldiers, but what do their families do when they are deployed? I mean, war is hell. And that's the nicest way of saying it. And it's not just for the soldiers that, are deployed and stuff, or it's about the people that are here left behind, the families, the friends, the outreach. And then it's about the people that help the veterans when they do come back, the people that work at the VA hospitals and the caseworkers, the mental burden that they carry, seeing what these people have been through, hearing what these people have been through. And as for, if it's maybe broadened with persons with disabilities and stuff, or the elderly, it might not mean as much, but it's still important. And I think there could be like some rewording if we're trying to get healthcare for, a broader picture, but definitely for the veterans. Yeah, they've earned it. That is so true.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess I don't think part of our thesis is that it is discriminatory, but there is this sense that healthcare is something that needs to be earned, right? And even for veterans, many of them are on disability in addition. Some of them wind up also on Medicaid. There's cases where if you're injured as a veteran and it's not a what's the phrase, Corey?
It's not an automatic
Service related.
transition into.
No, it's
Service related.
service related. That is it. If it's not a service related injury, like you could be in the military for years and years and years, and then let's say you're on leave and you get into a car accident and you become a quadriplegic. You're not, right? Like all of a sudden you're not covered, and that is crazy. And so the sense that you're only covered if you get injured on the battlefield, even if you've dedicated your life and years to service, like that's what we're trying to get at, is this idea that it has to be something that's deserved. And obviously veterans 100%, they've earned the benefits and they need to get more. And I guess what we're trying to get at is like, can we all fit into that category? Because not just because some of us are veterans, but because all of us are deserving human beings, and finding that common quality that we have that makes this all right. But Brandon, would love to get your thoughts on this question.
So as much as I don't like, but I'm going to say it anyway, is that I think healthcare should have that, like, different tiers of service. Like, veterans deserve the utmost highest, whether you're injured or not injured. If you have put on a uniform in any way, shape, or form and dedicated years or even months, it could be, I don't care. If you have put on that and took the oath, you deserve to have like that top level tier service, and then it can go down from there. The people that find it discriminatory are sitting at Starbucks crying about an 8-hour service that they have to do, and they don't know how to function in society because somebody yelled at them about a coffee order. That's who finds that discriminatory. They don't get it. They want it, but they don't get it. Veterans deserve way better than they're getting. And yeah, they deserve it all for doing that service.
Awesome. Appreciate that. Scott.
Brandon, well said. I'll just talk from my experience just with my family members. I think it goes just not into what's happened in the military, whether you were injured or that. It's the after effects. I think we're talking mental. My father-in-law was, as I said, was in Vietnam. 2018, he died from Agent Orange. It took him that long to get affected by it to the point where cancer just riddled him. And he was, and if you don't know anything about Minnesota, we're called the nanny state. We have Mayo, we have Alina, we have Minnesota University that pumps out doctors. We are medically a medical state. And so the VA is well established, well organized. In 2017, he went for a checkup, and this is when they first started giving the VA the attention of saying, hey, some of these guys are waiting too long, and they're getting service, but they're not getting followed up on correctly. And from February of that year till November, his cancer went from a surgery that was necessary in November to there's nothing we can do for you because it got delayed so long. And then 4 months later, he died of cancer. And the toughest part about after that was his widow had to fight to get him established as an Agent Orange recipient. And the government didn't want to label as that. They wanted to keep that out of his death certificate because that meant they had to give him more money in a different way. Or I'm not sure all what went into it. Wasn't talked much in the family. But again, the difficulties of people after these deaths and having to fight for anything military, once the soldier is gone, the family still has to deal with a lot of things, and it's usually government red tape. And I think as far as the tier system, I think that's also a way of just, again, there are different levels of people in society that want to participate. Some don't, some do, some will, some won't. And I think that could be tied into, again, on what type of care that you're looking to get. Is if you'll do more for the society, like an ultimate, like giving your life or putting your life on the line, like the military, I think that deserves our unbridled affection to it, and just say, you just get what you need. That's one of the things I feel strongly, like I've been hearing for the rest of the panel, is there shouldn't be restrictions on if you choose to swap your life for mine so I can sit back here. I want you to have everything you possibly can. And just as we're quickly talking about medical equipment and the ramping system, one of the things I've realized, and again from this conversation, there's a lot of that around my area in Minnesota where we've had some passing of veterans, particularly World War II, Vietnam, and there is a lot of equipment out there that people are willing to donate, and families are going nuts saying, hey, we just put it in a year and a half ago because they just got around to getting it. What do we do with it? And there's an organization that I'm working with to try to help out and send people there to help figure out how to get that repurposed. And so, because there are people that a lot of the houses have almost the same, footprints and stuff where it's so high and so long, and some of that stuff could be reused. And I think that most families that have somebody that passes away really like that idea of passing along to either another veteran family or somebody that needs it. I guess I'm very much in favor of keeping. I mean, I think everybody deserves care, and everybody deserves immediate care. But I think as far as distinguishing, is there a tier system of there is in everything else? And I hate to say that it shouldn't. Money does talk, but unfortunately, it shouldn't talk all the time. Service and basically, I guess I'm just saying what you've done for our country deserves more than just thank you all the time. It should be backed up by something.
Absolutely. And I wish, in part with some of that stuff, that you give some more discounts at Best Buy, because I'm always there. And that would be fantastic. But I really appreciate you guys' feedback concerning where we stand with those things. I mean, healthcare is obviously like a humanitarian issue. We should all have access to it, but there just is a slight difference just because of the pledge and the oath that we take to serve our country and in preparation, possibly die for it. But John, I'll let you move on to the next one.
So before we move on, the VA schedule for rating disabilities, or the VA SRD, in the Project 2025 document that is, rather quickly or slowly being implemented, they highlight one of the areas of reform being to review the number of health conditions that have been added, which is a potentially dangerous thing because the most recent ones were Agent Orange and the burn pits, and there was a lot of pushback against the burn pits that took a long time to pass. So there's some big concerns that are rapidly occurring even now. VA hospitals trying to be pushed to see more patients without necessarily more funding for staff. So there's a lot of issues that veterans benefits, they need to be defended in every way possible, obviously, because of what we've all been saying. But moving on. So as we age, or as we get disabilities at any point in our life, the need for affordable and quality healthcare seems to be more of a focal point, especially for those of us with health issues. Trying to find a solution isn't easy. As someone with a disability, what reforms would you like to see changed in healthcare in general? And do you believe the Veterans Health Administration could be a model for universal healthcare? And I will pass that to Mark.
I don't know if it could be a model for universal health care simply because it's got plenty of deficiencies. A model for universal health care is probably something overseas. Some of our European neighbors that have got much more comprehensive and something more universal. And I understand that people with disabilities, have more opportunities for their benefits and research and equipment and things like that in some countries. In Europe. So I think that would be a better model than the VA.
Definitely. And I can understand that perspective. Sometimes I think as parts of the VA can be implemented in healthcare. But like, as you said, they have plenty of deficiencies. And just even going back to what Scott said, back in 2014, one of the VAs in Phoenix, Arizona, had about 40 veterans die who predominantly had cancer. They died because they were put on a secret list, hidden from federal regulators, and they were unable to, get the 14-day time period for them to see a primary physician. It was more like 115 days, something that me and John spoke about, the danger of maybe like privatizing the VA because, you're worried about CEOs and these corporate based companies getting more profits. But part of the lack, according to an article I read with the VA back in 2014, was they had bonus incentives if you could process veterans' appointments. And so they too are just as bad as trying to privatize it when money is the incentive. But Bernadette is just joining us right now from Kenya. Thank you, Bernadette, for showing up. We have about 13 minutes left. So, if you could just briefly introduce yourself. And, question two is, as a person with a disability, what reforms would you like to see change in healthcare? And if you could briefly tell us if you know of any veterans in Kenya, and, how does the health administration kind of work in Kenya for veterans?
Bernadette from Kenya. Health insurance in Kenya is also have a lot of challenges because, I am an instructor, I have an insurance, but usually go to the hospital. When you visit there, you have to get approval from the employer. So sometimes the employer refuses to approve for the treatment because of the cost. So sometimes you have to wait for a long, or sometimes you use your own money to pay for the insurance. So it's usually hectic, and you usually fight for a good insurance cover. Thank you.
Bernadette, do you know if veterans in Kenya have a different experience than other normal citizens?
No, not at all. They don't have any special treatment. We are in the same line. There is no way a disabled person is treated differently. My needs, there is no difference. We are all in the same line. They don't specifically point on a disability person and treated differently. We are treated the same. So sometimes you find you go through your own cost because as a disabled person, you go through a lot of challenges rather than the normal person. So sometimes you find as a disability, you have to use your money because the insurance cannot cover all what you are required in case of sickness. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, Bernadette brought up a very important point, which was also the topic of today, which is the privatization of healthcare. One of the differences, if you're a veteran getting VA benefits, the coverage of these things are covered by the insurance. I guess, Corey, right? There's a copay sometimes.
Yes.
Right. But in
not for
other
people, but sometimes with other people, yes.
But what happens when we're talking about reforming these things, right? Making them better. When you hear about privatization, that means handing over control of these systems from non-profit government, fairly transparent government programs to the hands of private companies, which are more and more becoming private equity-owned companies that have a huge profit motive to deny services, as Bernadette was mentioning, when they cost too much. You'll see this across the board, especially for people who need wheelchairs in nursing homes across the country. New Jersey just this year is possibly passing a law to prevent nursing homes and the private equity-owned managed care organizations from denying wheelchair users a right to their wheelchair if they're in a nursing home. So these are just because of the cost. So these are just some of the issues with privatization, and we need to be very wary of that. But want to pass it on now to, Harley.
Goodness, I agree with Mark. Healthcare, we could use some examples from foreign healthcare programs better than what we have here. Just in the 30 years that I've been disabled, when I first became disabled, I was able to get cleansing sprays, creams, and anything I needed for my medical needs. Now I have to pay for my own butt covers. Some people might say TMI, but this is what I talk about openly to everybody. We call them underoos, but others call them depends. Insurance no longer covers underoos. And it's like, golly, I don't even make, barely over 900, and now I've got to pay for those. That's $100 a month out of pocket that now I have to pay. My chair quality has gone down the toilet. I used to be able to get a good chair. Now it's like, well, according to your insurance, you can only get this type of chair. Well, I want it in this color. Nope, that's out of pocket because it's not the correct color. Tie down hooks. Oh, that's not necessary because it doesn't add to your independence inside the home. I'm sorry, if I need to get to the doctor, which helps me stay independent in my home, shouldn't I have them? It's healthcare has gone down the toilet in the 30 years that I've been in a wheelchair. And we need to really revamp the whole system. And for it being privatized scares the living hell out of me. I have no other nicer way to say it.
Yeah, I can agree with that. You know, healthcare definitely needs to be reformed. Sometimes I wonder, without, figuring out a way how people couldn't abuse the system, but sometimes I wish it was like yearly vouchers, you know what I mean? Or like a monthly voucher that says, okay, you're allotted this amount of money and you can go into the wheelchair dealer of your choice. You can go into the doctor's office of your choice, provided that they're within that particular network. And it's literally your own kind of credit card that gets reimbursed, or the cost is taken care of. You know what I mean? I know the government kind of manages that with other types of insurance, but I think it gives people the access and the freedom to move about with it on their own. Like, for instance, with me being a veteran, like I have a standing wheelchair and it's cool and all, but they also, I had to go through a set of bone density scans to make sure that I'm even equipped for the chair. It's not like you can just go in and say, I want this, give that to me. It has to be medically justified. And so I wish there was more access for people in general to just be able to go into anywhere by their own choice. And I wish some type of reform, or I hope that some type of reform can pivot in that direction instead of denying people because they don't want to cover the cost of the pens and whatnot. Like you said, they can get very expensive. Brandon, what's your thoughts on question 2?
I think universal care at this point is a pipe dream. It's a great thing. I just don't see it ever actually coming to fruition. I mean, there's great models out there, but again, where it is, it's got holes in it. It's no system 100% perfect. Otherwise, everybody'd be doing it. So I just, if it ever happens, it certainly isn't going to be in my lifetime. More than likely won't be in my kid's lifetime. You know what I mean? That's that whole 2255 thing that we see in movies. You know what I mean? Like Star Trek. It's never going to happen for me to see. So, I mean, it's all well and good, but I don't even know about the second part either.
But Brandon, I have a question,
Yes.
which is if there are, I don't know, probably dozens of other countries, if not dozens, then at least a handful of other countries that have universal health care, including our neighbor to the north, Canada. Why is it impossible here when we have, we have the VA as is one imperfect model. We have Medicare, which does cover all of us after we're 65 or older, and we all are paying taxes into. It's not impossible.
It's not impossible. I will give you that. I think, again, that goes back to that whole part of policing our own backyards that I was talking about earlier. Right now, half of the country is so torn on inclusion therapy that you have to talk to somebody exactly the way they want to be talked to, and you have to call somebody exactly what they want to be called. Everybody's too worried about this stuff, critical race theory and whatever have you, that we're not looking at broader pictures like healthcare. That is being put on the back burner. And there's more things that we need to be doing, policing our own backyards and our own streets and getting us as whole as a country that we need to be thinking about instead of all these little petty things that everybody else wants to be dividing the country on right now. We're so torn down the middle. Everything lately, the last 3 years, everything has been politicized so much that literally the country is on the verge of another civil war and violence in the streets, trying to put, Band-Aids and things on the country and making it a better place right now. That's where we need to be. And yes, I agree, it is possible as long as everybody can get on the same page on what really is the problem and what we need to be fixing.
Yeah, I mean, and it's definitely, it sounds like it could be a real unifying goal, right? If we could all, because that's one of the biggest problems we all face. Scott, your final thoughts.
I think everything's been well said, and I got to agree with Brandon on a lot of this until we can actually figure it out. And I think one of the things is these other countries are a lot smaller. We're 330 million people. What Brandon just said, half of us don't agree with the other half. But until we get some of those taken care of, I just think that it's a wonderful, in theory, progress, but I think we need to start doing some smaller versions, having one state maybe accomplish it for some years and then follow a recipe of how to work that around. But to go national, I think that would be, you're talking to a state that we've had over $980 million of fraud in the last 4 years, half of it through medical. I'm just saying those people are still attached to things. And so then you have that aspect. And then you have shortages of doctors and nurses. I mean, there would be a great world if we could live in it if that was possible. And I think at this point, I think that's one start date 2020 or 22, 25. What were you there, Brandon? Yeah, we're out there. We're out there in Spock time.
That definitely was well said. And unfortunately, I think we've gotten to the place where I think we're desensitized from the hope of these dreams. You know, we started off this year talking about the American dream and in essence what that dream really meant. And that was building a nation where it didn't matter your financial status or where you ranked at in society. It was a place where everybody has a fair shake at opportunity and being able to have access to all the needs that a person really has to go for. And I think we continuously lose sight of that when we as we progress and people develop different issues that we can't really always account for. You know, like John said earlier, evaluating what types of disabilities are covered isn't helpful when you don't know what's going to come from it, right? You know what I mean? So we have to be very careful when we're assessing disability and who has access for it. But more importantly, why do we even have to have this conversation when all of the lawmakers have the ability to access healthcare? People with access to money, and it goes back to something me and John we're talking about, and I'll let John add on to it. But like, you know, the targeting of diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives of the 2,600 different programs that are there. Diversity is a plus in the workplace because while you get people off the system who want to work, you know, some of us here on a call, we are employed, and we hope that, you know, in the income that we earn, we're trying to slowly weed ourselves off of the need. But if you eliminate programs that are supposed to take a discrimination out of the picture, then how can we ever progress and have access to the healthcare and the needs that we have?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's important to note DEI includes an A for accessibility, right? And as I noted at the beginning, the funding cuts that we're seeing across the board, these are not going to increase funding for Medicaid. These are not going to increase funding for disability payouts. So if we, as a disabled community, have any hope of keeping what we have and then perhaps pursuing that dream of universal healthcare to fix the holes, we have to find solidarity in these other marginalized groups, because the same programs that benefit us also benefit other minorities, also benefit immigrants, also benefit the homeless, also benefit veterans. And we need to find solidarity and overcome the differences that we see between one another in order to achieve these goals. And just one ending note, that in the United States, we spend twice as much per person on healthcare compared to other leading health systems, and our outcomes do not match. We do not have twice the better outcomes. And meanwhile, the private health insurance industry per year since in 2022 made over 25 billion, a 3% increase from the previous year. So there is a lot of money being made off of our imperfect healthcare system. There's a lot of resources that can be used to change what we have. Look, we need our Medicaid. Look, we need our veteran services. Look, we need our vocational rehab, which is part of the Department of Education that is about to be defunded and cut. We need these services that protect people with disabilities because they protect all of us. So, yeah, it may be a pipe dream, but it is a dream worth fighting for, no matter how long it takes. And it may take some time, but together we can get there, I believe.
And thank you guys for participating in this, More Than Walking video podcast discussion.
Stay tuned in and join us next month and sign up for the More Than Walking newsletter at morethanwalking.com to learn about the topic we will cover next. Also, like, comment, and subscribe to our More Than Walking YouTube channel to watch each podcast, and we'll be dropping new episodes every Monday or Tuesday. Follow us wherever you listen to podcasts. Just search for More Than Walking or Super Adaptables.
Yes, and until then, remain encouraged, stay hopeful, and above all else,
keep adapting.